I was raised by a very unpredictable, daily drinking, rageaholic father. So he loved me tremendously. I never doubted my father's love for me, but if he was set off, he didn't care who was listening. He didn't care if we were in public. He didn't care how he hurt me or my mother, and it would just go. And so I am never angry. And when I tell you, I sat in Dr. Sarno's office when I was having the worst of my back pain, and he was talking about rage. His number one was always rage. And he looked at me, and here I am, a lot younger. And I was like, oh no, Dr. Sarno, I'm literally, I'm telling you, I swear to God, I'm never angry. And he laughed out loud and he goes, oh, you're angry, all right. Because anger wasn't safe to me, because I didn't want to align with something that I found so disgraceful as a young person. And by the time I met Dr. Sarno, my father was dead, and I could have said or felt anything, and it still was in my DNA not to. So it's not that there's one emotion that's more impactful than another. It's how they land for you.
Welcome back to the podcast, and Happy New Year's, everybody. Today's conversation is one that a lot of people didn't know they needed until now. We're joined today by Nicole Sachs, a chronic pain therapist who didn't just study pain, she lived it. Years of physical suffering, endless searching, doing everything she was supposed to do, until she started asking different questions about what the body is actually responding to when it has chronic pain. Nicole's work sits at the intersection of emotion, pain, and our nervous system. And it challenges a deeply ingrained belief that pain is always about damage and healing is always about fixing the body. What she discovered instead didn't just change her life. It reshaped how she now helps others. Pain is one of the few things that every human shares, yet almost none of us are taught how to relate to it. When it shows up, we brace, we fight it, we try to outthink it. This conversation is going to reframe that instinct, so the next time pain enters your life, you won't meet it the same way again, and you won't experience it the same way again. Nicole's work is amazing. You have to hear this for yourself, for your loved ones. Enjoy the show, everybody. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show. You're very popular and very busy, and it's an honor to have you.
It's great to be here, and I am always happy to have these conversations because all I want to do is find people who might not know and give them the opportunity to heal themselves.
We have similar missions, maybe different methods, but similar missions for sure. Yeah. So I thought a good place to start, so people get a good sense of what you're about. You often say, that something really stops people in their tracks, that emotions aren't harming us because we feel them, but they're harming us maybe because we don't feel them. And that's going to tie into everything that we're going to talk about. But what do you mean when you say that?
What I mean is that we, we live our lives very busy, and emotions or emotional experiences or triggers or anything that activates us are incredibly inconvenient. We have too many responsibilities, and quite frankly, if you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, we don't actually have the ability to feel everything. Not everything is intentional. Your brain and your nervous system will protect you from a certain number of your feelings, which is why the word defense mechanism makes sense. It defends you by repressing a certain number of emotions. So we are pretty much both unconsciously and consciously driven to feel less of how the world interacts with us, how it impacts us. And in that, our emotions can rise to a certain level unconsciously, where it starts to turn our nervous system into a fight or flight machine. It starts to protect us naturally against the rising of this overwhelm. And the way, and I've been, in the way my work goes, is that a lot of that emotion gets targeted into the body and in the form of like inflammation, muscle constriction, spasm, neuropathy. And that's the way we feel it. So when I say your emotions aren't hurting you because you're feeling them, it's because you don't. It's because instead of feeling the level of grief maybe that you feel over losing someone, you're just getting migraines. And it's not just because they're ruining your life, but that's kind of the way it's going.
Yeah, that is, we could spend days talking about
Just that one.
how just that single answer that you just gave, and I often do talk about it, because you learn that feelings are stored in the body for better or worse,
Mhm.
and we kind of move through joy and love and metabolize it quite easily because they're those lighter emotions. And I'm pretty sure that it's now been proven that trauma and certain emotions like fear, they can get stuck in the body, and I mean, like, ancestral trauma has gone from this woo woo myth to actually, well, we can tell if your great great grandparents were in the potato famine in
Right.
Ireland,
Right.
right? Because we can see it in their genes. We're like, wow, that's wild. So there's so much to what you're saying. And when we talk about chronic pain, what are we really talking about is the question.
What we're talking about, first of all, the one thing I often say to people is chronic pain is not an epidemic of pain syndromes like the way people think it is. It's actually an epidemic of fear and meaning, because chronic pain is fueled by this level of nervous system dysregulation and the fact that we're all stuck in fight or flight. So when you jump from one specialist to the next, or one medication to the next, or treatment or alternative plan or diet change, what you're doing is you are giving your brain and your nervous system something that they can control. And even though this is not something that you would consciously choose, it's actually the preferable stance for a dysregulated system, right? Like, can you tell yourself you're doing something? Is there a neat A plus B equals C tell you can tell yourself? Because in the end, none of us have the control that we wish we had. But in the end, so that's basically how we're living. We are living in an epidemic of projection and catastrophizing and pre-grieving because we have no other choice. And you just mentioned that it's so much easier to allow yourself to remember, like, the joy, the trauma, or
Right.
the joy, and the presence. But that's actually how we are hardwired as human beings
Mm.
and as animals in general. We are hardwired to remember the bad so we don't experience it again. Because, the primary purpose of the brain and the nervous system is to keep us alive. I joke around with people who misconstrue my work as the pain is in their head. I often say,
Mm.
well, the pain isn't in your head, but if I cut off your head, you're not going to feel your shoulder pain. So it's not that the pain is in your head, it's that the brain dictates every single thing that we
Yeah.
feel. So you are genetically and organically going to fixate on that which is negative. And then that's what keeps the nervous system feeling like at least you have some semblance of control.
And that's how, a mood becomes an attitude, becomes a personality trait, not just with pain, but we see it, like, I observe it in people who have become a certain way. It's like, God, they didn't always used to be that way. And it's the same thing with pain. They didn't always used to have the pain. But I feel like what you're talking about manifests itself in a myriad of ways. Of course, chronic pain is a big one, but it also comes out in personality, comes out in relationships, because those emotions and then and pain and the trauma has to go somewhere. And when it doesn't, it gets stored, and then it comes out in ways that we end up at a doctor's office or a therapist's office trying to figure out what went wrong.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, it's the story of my life helping people.
hmm so why do so many people have, like, clear imaging, like herniated discs, degeneration, and yet no pain, while others are like in agony and they can't find a single thing, to point to and say, oh, well, this is what's causing you pain?
Yeah, I often say that people come through my door in one of three ways. Either A, they have a finding that does seem to make sense, like I do, because I have a finding of spondylolisthesis in my back, which is where my original chronic pain began. So they have a finding that seems to line up, but no matter what they do, surgery, procedures, injections, whatever they try, the pain keeps coming back, or, they can't get rid of the pain. So that's one scenario. The second scenario is, like you said, they're having terrible pain and they're like, we can't find anything wrong with you. And the third scenario, which is sometimes the worst, is we can find something wrong with you. And this is more along the lines of like fibromyalgia, migraines, pelvic pain, different diagnoses where they say, sure, we know exactly what's wrong with you and we're sure, but there's no cure for that. So you're just going to have to learn to live with this for the rest of your life. And some of these people are in like 12 out of 10 pain. And that's when people become suicidal, because it's very, very challenging to hear from the medical establishment, which of course we're supposed to see as God, I mean, we're raised doctors as up here, that, they see what's wrong with you and there's nothing they can do about it. So those are really the three different ways I receive people. And the reason for that is manifold. I'll speak directly to your question. So my original mentor is Dr. John Sarno. He, for many years, was at Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center, and he was originally a doctor of rehabilitative medicine. And he realized, like, wait a second, why are my patients not getting better? He would be evaluating them. He would send them for surgeries. He would send them for PT or injections, and they would come back and they'd be like, I'm not better. And he started to understand patterns, which is that these people were like in unresolved relationships, or they were super angry and discontent. And he started to put it together. And what he started to understand as he moved to this mind-body model, and people were becoming completely chronic pain free through understanding their emotional experiences, he was like, I see. Bulging discs don't cause pain. They are normal abnormalities. And I will tell you, the reason that I say with the kind of confidence I say, and I've become known for all of these things, is because not only in my own body, but now at this point, hundreds of thousands of people have walked through my work, and I hear from them constantly, especially now in the internet age, that they have tons of diagnoses, all manner of diagnoses, from bulging discs to arthritis to spondylolisthesis to different gut findings, like gut microbiome findings that are considered abnormal. And, and the list goes on and on. And once they do this work, regulate their nervous systems and, understand the mind-body connection, they're completely free, even though their MRIs and all their findings are the same. So I'm 53, as you talked to me today. When I was 19, I was first MRI'd.
You're 53?
I am 53.
My God, you look amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. And I don't even have any sort of filter on the camera.
Wow.
But thank you. But honestly, I do think that the reason I am so youthful is because I live this way, because it's not just about pain. It's about longevity and thriving and understanding how you can live your best life. There is no body without the mind, but we can get into that in a moment. But the truth of the matter is, so I am certain at this point that these abnormalities that are being found in these tests, I'll just say this because I can't know you personally, are not necessarily the reason for your pain. And so the reason that people are having all these findings, and and I know that there are studies out of Harvard, Michael Danino at Harvard is doing these studies now. They're all referenced in my book, where they're taking people and they are analyzing that just as many people who have clear findings have pain than have problematic findings and no pain. And then there is no statistical correlation between these kind of findings and the proof of the pain being connected to them. And so essentially that's what's happening. And a lot of this is about an unlearning, about having lived on this earth for a certain number of years and received a consistent message, which is these abnormalities are associated with pain. And I really, my whole entire purpose, other than, allowing myself to have a bit of my own human life, my purpose in this world is to help people understand, what if we don't know? It's funny. My youngest daughter is a senior in high school, and she was giving me her presentation this morning for her philosophy class, because she had to present it. And she was talking to me about the philosopher Lao Tzu, who comes out of ancient Chinese.
I know Lao Tzu, yes.
Amazing stuff. And, and what she was saying is that the way to embrace this kind of philosophy in a way that it can help your life is to understand that maybe the way you have been thinking about it all along is not the only way. And when Lao Tzu would teach, what he would say is there is no higher understanding than 3 words. I don't know. If there is
Mm.
any space that you might be able to make space for you don't know, then the possibilities for what is are now limitless all of a sudden. And so that's what
Mhm.
I seek to get in there with my personal story and so many others. On my podcast, I have hundreds of people who their lives are completely changed, even though they thought they were locked into a certain diagnosis.
Transformed. Um, I have been fortunate enough to also been heavily involved in a community that has experienced similar, let's call them transformations, so that YouTube's algorithms don't, get mad or upset with my podcast again. You can't say words like cure or mention. It's a crazy time we live in.
I've gotten a lot of shit from that, and the way I get around it, and I don't even need to get around it, but the way I always speak directly into
Hmm.
the space of where people are concerned. And the reason why my podcast is called The Cure for Chronic Pain is because there is a cure for chronic pain. There is not a
Hmm.
cure for human pain. There is not a cure for human suffering. There's no cure for the human condition, which sucks because I wish there was. But there
Yeah.
is no cure for human pain. But chronic pain is an epidemic of fear and meaning. And I will tell you, if you have a problem with it, click on over to my podcast and decide, is your life worth giving yourself the chance of being curious? Because
Yes.
that is where you get to choose what your life is.
Always. We are conditioned to, from the time we're young, that we are a victim to our genes, to our circumstances, to everything. But that what we should be teaching our children, and what I try to teach mine, is that you always have a choice. You don't have to accept what's, particularly when it comes to doctors and authorities who try and dictate what is and isn't as if it is law, when really we're all human beings, and no human being has true authority over another. And we all have this incredible ability to create our own reality in so many ways, but they like to make us think that we need them at every turn, and they make us pay them at every turn as well. But so what you're talking about is, and the work that you do, is so vital. And the fact that you do it in such a mainstream, incredible way, that like, I have to take my hat off to you.
Thank you. I
But
appreciate it. It's
you,
it's not it's not like a small effort. I mean, the mainstream
mm,
of me is from years and years of fighting to be heard. And
oh yeah,
what I'm heartened by is I believe we're at a point where the collective consciousness is rising to the place where this conversation has merit. And
yes,
also for the fact, and this speaks to what we were just saying, that I don't ever believe that this is going to be a top down solution. This is going to
mm,
be millions and millions of people who each decide, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I'm just
mm,
willing to replace my skepticism with curiosity and take a look what these people are saying. And if, my whole thing is, if what I'm saying doesn't work for you, like, go with peace. I have
right.
no interest. I used to. I have no interest in convincing anybody of anything. All I want to do is allow people to know that this work is an option for them. And once they get that, then it's part of their journey, like what they want to pick up. But I do
Exactly.
think that the biggest grief that I get is when I hear from people, and this is, by the way, a regular occurrence. I'll hear from someone somewhere in the world that I've never met that says, I want to write to you. And this is like very, very dark, but I was in so much pain. It had been so many years that I just made a little pact with myself that if I didn't see the light at all by like Christmas,
Mm,
I was going to take my life. I could not carry on. And they write to me and say, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And on a deep dive in Google, I found an interview you gave. And I am writing to tell you that it's 6 months later and I'm back to work full time, or I'm having a baby. It's like gives me chills every time. The
hmm.
last line of that email is always something along the lines of, I can't believe for all these years, I didn't know this work was an option. I didn't
Hmm.
know it existed. So there you find my purpose, which is I want people to know it's an option. They could say, I don't believe in it, or I don't like it, or I don't, or they could disparage me. That's fine as long as they know.
I think it was Tennessee Williams who wrote in one of his plays, "Sometimes there's God so quickly."
Mm,
And
like that.
when people find, what they're looking for, and you will, you will, if you persist, you'll find what you're looking for better or worse. So, but that's, it's an incredibly heartening story, and I'm sure it's one of hundreds you've had. So, you mentioned that you trained with Dr. John
Sarno.
Sarno,
Yes.
and I think it's fair to say he changed your life, right?
I mean, I think it's fair to say he created, okay, he not necessarily did, because I do really, really believe that each of us has the agency to change our lives. But similarly to what I'm saying to you, his work and the public discussion of it, which at the time in the early 90s, when I came upon it, mid 90s maybe, was on the Rosie O'Donnell talk show, right? So
Wow.
this is like, the grace of, you know, that moment that my mother happened to be watching this talk show, TV kind of stuff that I didn't watch, but she did. And she called me, just like kind of somewhat hysterical, being like, that diagnosis you got, this whole thing you've been dealing with, it might not be the only
Mm.
answer. And that's when I found Dr. Sarno's work. And in understanding it and doing it and studying it, and then eventually partnering with him and lecturing with him, I was able to, I mean, I have not had any chronic pain in so many decades. And
Mm.
the availability of his work and his theories, which certainly are not embraced by all, are the reason that I have, first of all, my three children, and I exercised till the day they were born, when I was told at 19 I would never have
Wow.
children. So, I mean, there's like a whole three people, and who knows
Mm.
the work they're going to do in the world. And just the fact that I got the opportunity to live a full life, and at my age can run 5 miles and travel the world, and nothing is wrong with me, even though on film something is very wrong with me. It's a normal
Mm.
abnormality in my spine.
It's it's beautiful. Tell me what TMS is for people who are first hearing this podcast. Give them a grasp of it if you can.
So, TMS is something that some people use to describe what the work that I do, and some don't. And the reason why I've held on to it is because TMS, I'll just so it's not a mystery, it stands for tension myoneural syndrome. And
Hmm.
that was Dr. Sarno's um, original term. That
Hmm.
was the umbrella under which many, many chronic issues resided. So, for example, and this is another thing that I think is important for people to understand. If the genesis of chronic issues is in the brain and the nervous system, and this is not to say, by the way, very important, the pain is not in your head, you're not hysterical, you're not making it up, you're not overly sensitive, and you're not at fault. Okay. So the pain is the pain. The pain of my back when I was brought home from college, literally carried by my parents, and needed someone to take me to the bathroom. Like, this is not a joke. The pain that I experienced was as acute as if my limb was being severed. So this is
Hmm.
not the pain is in your head. This is the genesis of the pain signals are a result of this dysregulation in your nervous system based on emotions that are perceived to be so dangerous they can't be
Hmm.
felt, like depth of rage and shame and fear, and all the big grief, like the big ones that are,
Hmm.
they literally dysregulate us so much that we feel as if we can't survive. And that's an unconscious feeling of not being able
Yeah.
to survive. That's your brain deciding that it's going to protect you. So all of these things that fall under this category, and I'll just name a smattering, are pretty much any chronic stomach issue, often labeled IBS,
Yeah.
and doesn't matter about the gut microbiome analysis necessarily. And any chronic back, neck, shoulder, knee, hip, jaw, things that you might have thought, oh, it's from that dental thing. Not necessarily. Oh, it's from my bulging disc. Not necessarily. Migraines, fibromyalgia, lots of nerve stuff, tons of pelvic diagnoses like interstitial cystitis, pelvic floor dysfunction. The list goes on and on. A lot of skin disorders, long COVID. Oh my God, long COVID. The long COVID cases I have seen and resolved completely are so
Wow.
extreme that people were potentially in the dark 23 to 24 hours a day, could not, needed. I have one competitive skier who I interviewed several weeks ago on my podcast, and he was in his early 20s at the height of his long COVID, even though he is and was a skier who is doing like those crazy, like off the jump,
Moguls and
like flipping
yeah.
several times. And,
Oh wow.
and he's now back competing. At the time of the worst of his long COVID, his father was putting him in a wheelchair to go from his bed to the bathroom. So I am not talking about things that people are choosing, and I am not talking about things that are less, even though it spans the gamut to things that are just like troublesome, like a lack of energy for life or like some dull headaches, but it can be anywhere in between.
Like chronic fatigue syndrome. What about like Lyme disease? Have you had any?
Let's talk about that
Well, I
after.
guess that's yeah, that's a little different, I guess.
It's
But
not a little different. That's
okay,
I'll get to that. But
okay,
there's so much to say, but I want to finish to answer about TMS. So TMS is an umbrella under which all of those things reside. And this is coming straight from Sarno's theory, because if your brain and your nervous system are the genesis of the issue, because they're trying to protect you from these big feelings, it is immaterial where they show up. So in her, it's going to be IBS, and in him, it's going to be back pain, and in her, it's going to be pelvic pain, and in him, it's going to be migraines. And it is literally immaterial because of the syndrome, but it's not immaterial for you. The way, and this is all about the complexity of the human brain. And I want to just reiterate, this is everything I'm saying, because we're only going to be able to do a taste of it on a podcast.
right.
Everything I'm saying is rooted in science. It is a neuroscientific process that no doctor will dispute, by which we feel things based on the dysregulation of the human nervous system. So that's what TMS is. And the reason why I've kept the terminology, even though it does confuse people, is I have years and years of running these communities and being presiding over people who are doing this work. And it's like such shorthand. People will be like, oh, my TMS is flaring today. It could be in a migraine. It could be in a stomach ache. It doesn't matter. We need to look at the genesis. What's going on for you? Why do you think you feel dysregulated? Why does your nervous system think you're in danger? We don't look toward, it doesn't mean you can't take Advil. It doesn't mean you shouldn't take an
Right.
antacid. Like, do what it takes to feel better in the moment, but it's never going to be the solution.
It's a band-aid.
Yes.
You're attacking the symptom and not the cause, and that's
Yes.
why you're going to have a return cameo very often. So for Dr. John Sarno, I know when you looked at his patients, something about you just became convinced that this wasn't simply placebo, that there was more going on, right?
Yes. And well, I mean, the concept of placebo is interesting in that your perception is your reality. So, for example, if we're looking at the primary purpose to regulate the nervous system and feel like we're in rest and repair instead of fight or flight, if you're walking down the street and you see sort of like a shadowy situation and you're already thinking, I don't know if this is a great neighborhood, if you perceive that there is someone who could be jumping you around that corner, all of the fight or flight mechanism is going to begin in your body. Changes in respiration, circulation, heart rate, digestion, elimination, all of these things are going to begin to change for you, because whether there's a predator there or not, you are preparing to fight, flee, or freeze. Now, let's say you start to get a little closer and you look and you see, oh my God, it's a bush. And the way the wind was blowing, the bush is going like this. As soon as you see that it actually is a bush, it might take a few minutes, but you're going to regulate. And like, you're not going to feel that way half a mile down the road. So placebo is an interesting concept. I think it feels light because the whole concept of the placebo effect or things being psychosomatic have become synonymous with like fake or making it up or all those negatives like pain is in your head. But in the end, it's about knowledge, it's about
Hmm.
education. Because if indeed you are doing work that is regulating you and your pain starts to go away, I don't know if I need to label it anything other than
No,
you are evolving in real time.
that's, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, in the end, all roads lead to Rome. You know what I'm saying? I mean, our bodies have an incredible innate capacity to regulate once we put our minds to it the right way,
Mhm.
and that regulation can be a great reliever of nearly everything that we're experiencing when it comes to certain pain and chronic symptoms. So, I agree with you. I think placebo is one of the, to say it's kind of become, it's like you said, synonymous with certain, like, oh, well, it turns out, like, it doesn't mean you were making it up. It
No,
just means that your body has the innate capacity to fix itself. There's a big difference. You know what I mean? Like, I think people get confused, but we all have the ability to create a placebo, just like we have the ability to create a nocebo effect in us.
right.
You know, so it's a powerful thing, and it's something that people should look at, but understand. But I understand why you're making the distinction, because your work kind of transcends any notion that it would be placebo. There's actual work going on. You know what I
Well,
mean? So it can't be just placebo.
one thing I'll say to sort of solidify that is I could be lecturing, let's call it to a room of 1,000 people, and I could say, raise your hand if you've ever had a stressful day and gotten a headache, or you felt really overwhelmed and you got a headache. Almost every hand in the room will go up. And then I'm like, okay, keep your hand raised if you ran to the ER that night for a CT scan because you thought you had a brain tumor. So everyone laughs and they put their hand down. And I explain to people what I'm teaching you, you already believe. You know that an emotional stimulus, which is stress and overwhelm, can cause a physical reaction, which is a headache. You
Hmm.
also know that if you get terrible news or if you go through a breakup, you could lose your appetite. You don't run to the GI specialist to see if like you've got a deep structural stomach issue.
Hmm.
You say, I'm going through a lot. My God, I can barely put food in my mouth. Like everybody knows that the mind and body are connected. So it's really just taking that knowledge and explaining to people this is what's happening when you're chronically ill.
Yeah. Do you think that um, Dr. Sarno's work shook the establishment a bit and scared them, because he made a suggestion which goes against, every profit making pharmaceutical, the entire system that we understand as allopathy is based on pharmaceuticals. I mean, I think I can say that without running any risk. It's a fact. But he suggested and was showing that pain, might be meaningful and not just a medical condition. Do you think that kind of rocked the establishment in a lot of ways?
Well, my answer is much more hopeful today than it might have been a few years ago if you asked me this question. So, yes, I do believe in the years, and he was 50 years, 50, at NYU
Wow.
Medical Center. I believe in the years that he practiced there, that was absolutely the case. However, here's what I'm feeling, being a practitioner at this stage of our history. I am seeing it soften. And the first thing I'll let you know is that I love Western medicine. Okay, so let's not go get me wrong. I
Okay.
love antibiotics. My daughter had a terrible throat infection a couple weeks ago and she was in so much pain. And we had her swabbed and they sent it out and they're like, wow, it's not strep, but it's this bacteria and this. They gave her an antibiotic in 4 days, 3 days. She was completely well. Hallelujah. Okay, I am not against Western medicine. God
Right.
forbid I ever have a cancer or, something
Right.
that I will
Car
I will
accident.
get traditional treatment. That's just me. I just speak for myself. That I don't have a problem with it. But chronic disease more and more, and it is being accepted more and more because you know what? Doctors are good people and they want to help. And if they see their patients coming in patient after patient and not being helped by the latest pharmaceutical or the latest injection or procedure or whatever, they are enthusiastic about what helps. Now, I can't speak for every doctor, but many,
Right, of
many
course.
are, and many physical therapists are. And so, what I will say is that, yes, you're right. And yes, obviously, this work doesn't make tremendous money for, let's say, pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what it does do. And this is one of my latest investigations into what I want to do next. It saves billions of dollars in paying your disability and lost productivity for your employees. So at the very same
Mm,
pharmaceutical company where they might be losing because less people are taking opioids, they may be spending far less in supporting their own employees through their own health
yeah.
journeys, because these people don't need $200,000 back surgeries. They are just taking care of themselves. So I really do think that we are working toward a balance where
Yeah.
corporations are going to see the benefit of bringing someone like me in to do educational programs, to incorporate curriculum into their corporate settings, which is something I really want to do, because this is about helping people. This is about helping people thrive. When
Yep.
people struggle, oftentimes I say to them, I look them in the eye and I say, this is your life. Like, this is your life. What is it worth? A little curiosity, a little out of the box. Like, see, just try it,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you have to lose? The worst that could happen is you remain in that state. So I don't know what would keep anyone back from trying this, and I know the power of it. I'm a longtime student of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm sure you've heard of
I know, Joe.
Dr. Joe's work. I'm sure you, and so I understand this work is coming to the forefront one way or the other. We are in a transitional state, and the control systems that have been in place and kept, allopathy as the deity of all health and medications where people are starting to realize that there are other answers and there are other ways to approach what may be going on with the body. And that time is now more than ever, especially with what happened, in 2020 and 2021. And I think we're evolving. That's the good news. And it's in part due to people like you who are passionate about getting this work out there. So it's amazing. What do you think? Do you think that there are certain types of people who are more prone to chronic pain or to a diagnosis like this? And is it something that do you see it happening from the time they're young, or is it something that you see develops later in life?
I once again, I'm going to answer this question, but I think my answer is slightly different than it would have been a few years ago. So, for years, what I have broadcast, and I still agree with, is that people who are perfectionistic, people pleasing, goodists, we call them goodists in my work, people who it's like
Good.
extremely important to be seen as a good person, to be approved of, let's say, by society, your parents, your social circle, your community. These people tend to be more susceptible to chronic pain because there's so many places for, quote, failure if you are a perfectionist, because perfectionism is unattainable. And people mistake perfectionism for being striving for their best, where I say perfectionism is simply scanning the landscape constantly for where you've screwed up. So there's
Mm,
so much room for self-loathing and failure. People who have a very strong inner critic, people who are very high achieving. Oftentimes when Sarno and I used to lecture at NYU, our lecture hall, which fit hundreds of people, was populated by heads of state, heads of clergy, CEOs. Like, it's the smartest, most interesting
mm,
people because they are holding themselves to such a high standard and they are so vigilant and aware of the world around them. So it's anything that really can create a lot of emotional overwhelm. But
yeah.
having said that, the reason I say my answer might be slightly different today is that I am just looking around at the world and it's everyone. And it's not that we're afflicted, it's just that we're so human. And especially with the advent of the internet and like all this connectivity, there's never a place to hide. There's never a place
Mm-mm.
to tap out. And I do think it's more ubiquitous that it's like you wouldn't have, you might not identify as someone in chronic pain, but when you listen to a podcast like this, you're like, yeah, but I just get those headaches. Or, oh my
Mm.
God, like, come 3 p.m., I have no energy. Or I don't know why I can't seem to find joy with my children. Like, it's everyone. It's just how is it manifesting? Some people might have something so easy to define like back pain, but other people just have like this lack of joy for life that they might not label depression, and they're
Right.
constantly sort of anxious, but they wouldn't label it clinical anxiety.
Right.
Just this thing that they can't get past. And I want every one of those people
Uh-oh.
to know that it's like, this is, this applies to you. You are not the outlier.
Right. So you've had decades to work with so many people, and I'm wondering, if you look in retrospect, and I'm sure you've thought about this, like how much does childhood, like the emotional environment that a child is raised in, not just like obvious trauma, but the environment, how much does that factor into the people ending up with this kind of, dealing with this?
You know, I often say, so I have 3 children. Do you have any kids?
I do. I have two.
Okay. So most parents
Yeah.
with more than one child will attest that there's no way it's all nurture. Like, these kids are, my 3 children
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be more different than each other. Like, there's obviously a tie that binds them, but they are their own people. And I really believe that we all come into this life with a certain nature. Some of us are more sensitive, some of us are more emotional, some of us are more empathic. So it's more like your childhood does matter, but your nature really matters too. Because in
Mm-hmm.
my years, so I was a psychotherapist in private practice for 18 years before I even branched out to have podcasts and books and everything that I do now. And in my clinical work, and also just in my life, it's very obvious that if you come into this world with a certain nature, even if you have a great upbringing, even if you have what you might consider like a really happy childhood, or, like great parents or whatever, you could still really feel very afflicted. Because what if you're just an energetic mismatch to your family? So, like, I once interviewed
Yeah.
a woman, and I do this thing regularly called Real Time Heal, where I bring people either on my community platform or my podcast, and I have no idea about them. I've gotten a 1 paragraph email from them about their story, and I bring them on, and we just do a cold therapy session, like an unplanned. I have no idea what I'm going to get, and they tell me what's going on, and they tell me where they're at, and then I, kind of help figure out where they're stuck, and I give them tools. And I had one woman on the podcast once, and it was a real time heal. And she was so bereft because she could not get to why she was in pain. She was like, I had the happiest childhood. My mother loved me. Like, everybody
Mm.
always wanted me to be well, and everybody was always so concerned about me, because a lot of this stuff does go back to childhood in terms of looking in the rear view. You might have a problem now and you're 40, but like, you're like, wow, but maybe those headaches when I was in 4th grade, or that stomach thing that happened to me in 10th grade, or that, those panic attacks when I was a senior, like everyone puts the pieces together in the rear view. And so we were talking, and she came up with something that was really, really informative to me and helped me help other people throughout the years, which was, she was painfully, painfully shy as a child.
Mm.
And her whole family was this Italian gregarious family. So they were loving, nobody was abusive, but she
Mm.
felt so alone, because no matter what, she said her mother would sit at her bedside and cry because she loved her so much and she wanted to help her. And she's like, I couldn't find my mother. I couldn't
Mm.
find my mother in the way that I needed someone to relate to me. And so I came up with this term that sometimes people are like an energetic mismatch to their family.
Yeah.
So in that sense, even a happy childhood can feel traumatic because you cannot find the space to connect. So the more
Yeah.
obvious things, like all the ACEs studies and, like serious trauma, of course, like that's the obvious connection to this emotional overwhelm, but it could just be who you are.
Yeah. And it's like you said in the beginning of this podcast, we have a natural inclination, unfortunately, which steers us towards this, the body trying to keep us safe by not, processing, or like similar to the way we kind of store fat because the body doesn't need it. And what happens to the fat? It gets, it can then build up and we can get into health trouble. And like I see it in my youngest son, like when he gets emotionally triggered, he just starts self-berating, and I know he's never heard me or his mother talk like that to him or to ourselves, and I'm just like, I was like, wow, I'm trying to track that because I dealt with a huge negative interject and a lot of, issues, which took me many, many years, and I'm still working them out. But, like I had, I came from a very dysfunctional family and there was a lot of abuse that went on. And so I knew where it came from for me. I knew why I thought the way I did about myself. But for him, I was like, and that's where the nature versus nurture becomes very, very interesting, because we do have this kind of inclination to build walls and just seal it off and protect, and then wait, what's behind that wall again? It's
Right.
starting to smell a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you see generational patterns where pain or illness shows up in families, even when lives look completely different? I guess.
I have. And I think one of the things that can be really confusing for people is this generational stuff. Like a woman who says, well, my mom had migraines and my grandmother had migraines. So the first time I got it, I knew, okay, here we go. This is going to be my life.
Mm,
And I think a lot of that is your perception is your reality kind of thing. So if you're walking down that same street we discussed, and like that bush, even though it's waving in the breeze, looks like a predator, looks like somebody who might be jumping out to attack you for like a long time, and you are really continuing to look, that's going to start to put that fight or flight in a pretty significant space of really gearing you up. And so that can be lasting for people. So, I mean, your perception of your safety is the only thing
hmm.
your nervous system has to go on. So if you start getting migraines at age 17 and you've watched your mother in bed half her life, and then your grandmother is always this, you start to project what your life might look like, and that pours more emotional input into the reservoir, overflows more, and causes
Hmm.
migraines. So it's unfortunate that that happens, but that is often the case.
Yes, it is. I remember I was sitting in a conference with Greg Braden one weekend, and he was talking about, he said they did he's a big fan of Heart Math, and I'm sure you've heard of
Yes.
Heart Math Institute. And he was telling me about these cops that they taught them like a 5 minute heart opening, dropping into the heart, meditation, and they wanted to kind of do like EKGs and test what, because when a cop pulls someone over, obviously, even if it's just a speeding ticket, they have to be on alert in case this person is not just a speeder, but maybe a criminal, or and so, they run all these tests. They see like, the heart rate becomes very elevated in cops, which, I extrapolate, and I'm like, this should, if this world was more conscious, this would be taught to every cop. And then you would see all of these, shootings and the things that come directly out of our primal fear, that fight or flight that kicks in and makes us act, in a very adrenalized, oftentimes rash way. We would see these incidents drop. But he had these cops do this 5 minute meditation after every time they pulled someone over, and those cops, for the rest of the day, their heart rates were steady. The cops that didn't do it, they had increased, what is it, BPM, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, pretty much all day for many hours after that one incident. And if they pull more than one person over, it stays very elevated. But the cops who did this 5 minute heart meditation, they were like, their bodies reflecting no stress, and that's like, that's amazing, I think. And it speaks volumes how we can use our minds to regulate our nervous system and live a healthier life. That is a fact. There's nothing theoretical about it.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So I want to shift gears just, for a second, and I'm going to name emotions. Okay. And you tell me which one causes more damage. And then we'll keep the winner. We'll keep the winner and then we'll keep going. Um, is it anger or grief?
You're not going to like my answer because it's making the game, it's going to make the game so unfun. It really is. They're equal. All emotions are
Yeah.
created equal in that if they're dangerous to you. So the joke that I have about Dr. Sarno is I was
Mm.
raised by a very unpredictable, daily drinking, rageaholic father. So he loved me tremendously.
Mm.
I never doubted my father's love for me, but if he was set off, he didn't care who was listening. He didn't care if we were in public. He didn't care how he hurt me, or my mother, and it would just go. And so I am never angry. And when I tell you, I
Mm.
sat in Dr. Sarno's office when I was having the worst of my back pain, and he was talking about rage. His number one was always rage. And he
Mm.
looked at me, and here I am, a lot younger. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, Dr. Sarno, I'm literally, I'm telling you, I swear to God, I'm never angry. And he laughed out loud and he goes, oh, you're angry, all right. Um,
Yeah.
because anger wasn't safe to me because I
Mm.
didn't want to align with something that I found so disgraceful as a young person. And by the time I met Dr. Sarno, my father was dead, and I could have
Yeah.
said or felt anything, and it still was in my DNA not to. So it's not that there's one emotion that's more impactful than another, it's how they land for you.
Mm. That makes perfect sense. My father was also a rageaholic, and I was the one son who inherited that temper of his. He also would let his hands fly, which I developed the same kind of relationship to that you did to anger. I never had any inclination. I never raised a hand or even had a close call where I had any inclination for that, but I struggled with a very, very bad temper. And they used to call me by my father's. They used to call me Little Sal. My dad's name is Salvatore. I'm like, I'm not Little Sal.
Right.
But it's something I've worked very hard to, and I can't remember the last time I've actually lost my temper, which is amazing. But I understand what you're saying. Every emotion. I feel like they're a gift for them. They're a release valve. We need our emotions, and we need to allow them. Because they have to move. It's when they get stuck that we get in so much trouble, and that we could spend days talking just about that. But okay, since you ruined the game, we're going to go to the next one. No, I'm just kidding. No, I appreciate it. I understand what you're saying, and it makes perfect sense. So I'm glad I asked anyway. But so if someone carries, let's say, I want to use grief. I want to use, how about, like I know people who experienced something traumatic at the hands of another individual, and and they have not forgiven them, 20, 30 years later. They have not. They're holding on to that. What does that do? Like, that's an example. I could use another one with grief as a big one. People don't really allow themselves the full breadth and depth of their grief, and even people who are kind of emotionally fluent and understand some of this work, I sometimes I feel like even they put a stopper on it at some point, and don't allow all of it. And so what happens to their body after so many years when they do this?
It's kind of like anything else. The more input in, so I often call it the emotional reservoir, the more input into the emotional reservoir, the more there will be symptoms. And when people are frustrated, when they start doing this work and they're like, I've been really at it for like 3, 4 months, and why am I not completely better? And I always say, well, it took you 35 years to walk into the woods. You're not going to walk out in 3 to 4 months. Having
Yeah.
said that, though, I feel like all of my answers are both and. Having said that, there really is a truth to the fact that when you surrender, so now we're going back to our Lao Tzu, when you surrender, when you say, I got nothing, when you say, I'm really tired of doing what I'm doing and getting what I'm getting, so I'm opening my palms and I'm willing to do whatever's next, it is actually astonishing how no matter how many years you have pushed down your grief or your rage or your shame or your whatever, that how you can recover. Like the nervous system is not linear. It is truly like, if you look at animals, like real animals, if they are at the watering hole, like it's like a zebra, and the lion comes over through the savannah, they are not going to hold on to that any longer than they experience safety. So if the lion walks through and it's very clear that maybe it's recently fed and it's not interested in them, the moment it disappears, they're all going to shake it off and keep drinking at the watering hole. Like our nervous systems are truly protective. They are not here to punish us. Your body is not against you. Your body is for you, and you need to understand what's actually happening. So even though people might have experienced things for years, it's possible to release them quickly, but there is no timeline because we don't want to create that kind of urgency.
Right. That's that kind of pressure that probably acted in part as a catalyst for many people. So yeah, I understand that as well. I used to, I was an actor for 21 years, and I had a lot of trouble because I had a lot of emotional blocks, right? And my coach said to me one day, he said, I'm not going to yell at you or hit you. I can see that that's already the problem. That's already been done. And I was like, what? What do you mean? But it kind of pertains to what you just said. I'm wondering, how often, because I understand the power of the mind. I understand, I remember being, in school, in grade school and in high school, and being so determined to get out of school that I learned. It's probably one of the reasons I ended up being an actor. But I would take on the symptoms of being sick and display them, sometimes for hours, in order to get out of school. And then by the end of that freaking day, I had my stomach, whatever it was I was faking. I was like, shit. Like I went too far.
Yeah.
I went too far because I was like, now I'm really sick. This sucks. How much is fear of pain actually becoming the pain?
Yeah, it's a big thing. I mean, if you really want to ever, like, obviously this conversation is not going to last the rest of your life. So anytime you have a question that pops into your mind, either you or anyone listening, go back to dysregulation, right? So if your fear of your pain dysregulates you a lot, and if it leads you to perseveration and rumination and future casting and, oh my God, what's it going to be? And I need to make that work event because if I don't go to that, I could get fired. Or, oh my God, if I miss one more Little League game, my son is going to, all that projecting, that is what causes more pain. Anything that causes more dysregulation causes more pain and symptoms and all the sensations that are labeled as negative. And so what I say to people is the hack to the nervous system is giving up. The hack to the nervous system is surrender. And the sentence that I use in my communities is, however this goes, it's okay for me. And at first people hate that because they think acceptance equals agreement, and it doesn't. I know, however this goes, it's not okay for you. Like, I know that you don't want to miss that work event. Like, I got it. But your nervous system is desperate for the relief that comes for you saying, I can't control this. So I'm left foot, right foot, breathe, right? Chop wood, carry water. I'm going to do what I need to do today to take care of myself in all the ways that I learn. And however this goes, it's okay for me. And most times, if you're willing to stop with the urgency and the drama and just do that, it's going to go well for you. But it's going
to go a lot easier anyway. Oh my God, I love what you just said. I'm going to make a clip and I'm going to distribute it everywhere because, God, that's so many people, who just get caught in one projection after the next one, worry, anxiety, future, not present. You were talking about animals, and I think one of the reasons why most of us love observing, we have our dogs, we have our cats, and we love observing animals, especially in the wild, is because they're so freaking
It's
present
so pure.
in their bodies at all times. Like if an animal gets wounded, the only thing it knows it has to do is walk it off. It can't lament and
Right.
and be depressed about it. It has to heal. It has to keep going. And so we're always like, animals are so tough. Yeah, but they're so tough because they're so present in their bodies. They have, their level of consciousness doesn't allow them to get as kind of caught up and confused with this whole linear past future pain thing that we as human beings are blessed to be able to experience. Blessed, it would be one word. There's other people who would say it's not such a blessing, people who are going through it, but you understand
Yes, of
what I
course.
mean by that. So my guy, Dr. Joe, he talks about the idea that our consciousness shapes our biology, and that, what we repeatedly think and feel can train the body for better or worse. Do you see evidence of that playing out in your work as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the most important thing for people to realize is they have so much more power than they realize to affect their physical and emotional health. So it's not that there's blame because the way you perceive it affects your body, it is that there's power. And that is the number one thing people need to understand. If anything I can leave people with in this conversation is that, that our whole philosophy in this current human condition is that we have to give away our power. You have to give away your power to doctors or to pills or to regimens or to tests or to MRI results. Like, get them. Understand that the back pain you have is not because you have a tumor on your spine. Like, get checked out. But once it is determined that there's this gray area and that, maybe this is the problem, maybe it isn't. And a great way to assess that is, does somebody guarantee that this problem is going to be resolved, or at least that there is the medical protocol that is going to be resolved from having this procedure? No spine surgeon on the planet will tell you that your back pain is likely to be resolved from spine surgery. None.
Nope.
They will not. The reason they won't is because they know it is a crapshoot.
Hmm.
And so that's like what, if I had a tumor on my spine, I would run for surgery because I would know that is likely going to be the root of the
Right.
problem. But most of the situations are not that cut and dry. So I just believe that it's about education and it's about understanding that you have power.
Mm, I love that. So true. It's so true. Let's try another winner takes all. Okay. Um, this is about ways people try to cope with their pain. Which one keeps people stuck the longest, would you say? Distraction or denial?
Interesting. That's never been posed to me. So I don't have a quick, pithy answer for that.
Oh, that's okay.
I would say denial. If I had to pick one, because distraction is lighter. Distraction is
Mm,
something that we all are quasi aware of. Like when I pick up my phone and I'm scrolling Instagram reels, I know I'm doing it. I can get lost for a few minutes and then come back and be like, I cannot believe that just like 15 minutes has passed and I haven't realized that I'm going like this.
right.
That's more distraction. Denial is can be very
Mm,
unconscious, and denial and anything that's unconscious is just, harder path to get
yeah.
to it. And denial can be very self-protective, and denial can be very tender. I feel like denial has a lot to do with the inner child and parts of us that haven't been seen or heard because it's just not safe to accept a
Yeah.
situation as it is. So I would say denial is a bit more problematic.
Yes. I understand why you say that. Um, So what I've learned and experienced is, we are very much creatures of habit, and habits often look a lot like what you could call addictions. And so in my own experience, I've realized that my body has its own ideas about what it should be doing and when and with who, and I can consciously say, hey, let's not do that anymore. We don't feel good after we do that. And my body can say, yeah, 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 cool, man, you got it. And then 3 days go by and I find myself, and this is obviously like, we see this with people who struggle with addiction, with alcoholism, like, they do great for a week and then they get a stressful phone call. And, my mother used to always be like, I'm like, what happened? I thought you quit. She'd be lighting a cigarette. She's like, well, your aunt called me and she was, one thing set her off. And then she's like, and I don't know what happened. And she's smoking. Right. And what I've learned is, that there's a lot that lives and the body has its own ideas, and measure of control, which can be very subconscious. But who would you say knows more, the mind or the body?
You know,
The mind.
yeah, the body is the expression of the mind. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the body and the feelings, because we're in this, the feeling of being in it then is sending messages back to the mind. And then we're in this cycle, and so I would say that it's not that the mind is more powerful than the body, because it's in a feedback loop all the
In
time.
tandem.
But
Yeah.
I do believe that the mind and the brain structurally are in charge, which is why we need to understand their power in our health and in our sickness.
Yes. And anyone who has struggled with trying to change a habit or a lifestyle choice or any of the above knows that you have to regain control of your body, in a way that is similar to the way, somebody learns how to tame a horse, or train an animal, to do what it has to do to thrive in a certain environment. And so you can't separate the two, but you have to realize that sometimes you have to use your mind and your consciousness to exert the control or the effect or the change that you want
Yes.
on your body, um, so do you think that pain is like, we I've learned to listen to my body, um, do you think that pain is sometimes the body speaking when consciousness can't express what is going on?
Yeah, I think that's precisely what's going on. And, I wish I could talk to you about this all day. I actually, unfortunately,
Yeah,
have to go.
we're wrapping up.
But yeah, just because unfortunately, I'm on a time crunch. But I will tell you that your questions are so excellent, and I truly could take like 15 more minutes on each of them, because
Yeah.
I I want people to understand that literally that is what's happening. That is not conjecture. That is what's happening, is that your body is the canvas and your mind is the painter. And if you can understand that it's not that the canvas isn't important. The canvas is the thing you're going to hold up at the end. The canvas is going to be the story of what has created your meaning and your purpose and your impact, right? Here it is. It's
Yeah.
me, and I can be out here, and I'm not speaking to you from my mind. I'm speaking to you from my body and from my heart and from my voice. But I don't get this without the thing that is pulling the strings in the background, which is my brain, my nervous system, and my mind. And it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that any of me is less important, but it does mean that if I don't look at those parts of me, I will never understand why this is doing what it is. And that is where
Mhm.
people come into despair, because they're like, why is my body against me? And I say, it is not. Just learn about this intricate dance between your mind and your body, and you will always find a way to harmony.
Amen to that. That's beautifully put. I mean, is it so for people who are maybe listening who are dealing with a little bit of chronic pain, besides everything that we just talked about, is what would be like the one small thing, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm sorry, that they can do today to start on their healing journey.
Okay, so this is going to sound like I'm trying to sell something. I'm not. You have to learn. Like I wrote a book this past year. It's a small
Hmm.
investment. I'll read it to you on Audible. It's called Mind Your Body. I'm sure you'll link everything. Like, learn.
Yes.
So there are three legs of the stool with my work. Okay, the first is believe, and you could just bracket the word knowledge and education. The second is do the work, which is all the tools I've created to bring the stuff from the unconscious to the conscious. And the third is self compassion, patience, and kindness for yourself. We have no idea, and I can see it in your face how far you've come, given what you came from, that you've learned to be kind to yourself, because you can't stop a temper if you're beating yourself up every single day. You cannot. It's not possible. And so those three legs are the legs that will put your stool solidly on the ground, and you will be able to literally stand on it and thrive in your life. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to educate yourself. This podcast is an awakening. It's a moment. It's something that will intrigue you and hopefully invite you. And then, there's my book. I have all sorts of educational materials. I have a podcast with hundreds of episodes. Come over and just sit quietly in this stuff and see if it lights you up. And if it does, then I have all sorts of communities and ways you can learn and ways you can not do it alone and coaching and all this stuff. But it's really first about saying, does this light something up in me? Because once you come into alignment with the fact that this could be a solution for you, it's like, the possibilities really explode.
Nicole, you're amazing. Tell everyone your website and the name of your book and where they can find you, because I know they're going to be very interested.
It's super easy. My name is Nicole Sachs. There is no H in my name, which a lot of people misspell it. So it's NicoleSachs. Google me. My website is NicoleSachs.com. My book is called Mind Your Body, which you can get anywhere you get books or Audible. And we have, like I said, we have memberships and we have coaching and we have community and we have courses. I sell a course called Freedom from Chronic Pain that is asynchronous. You can just do it. You can come over and hang out with us on Instagram at Nicole Sachs LCSW. Truly, we are just here to spread information and to empower you. And wherever it feels comfortable to start, just give yourself that gift, because this is your life.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Nicole. I know how busy you are. I appreciate every minute and every ounce of wisdom you've shared. And I'm so excited for this podcast to air. We'll be in touch when it does. But
Right.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Bye. For everybody listening on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes, listen, if you're listening on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We're trying to build an audience in a not so algorithmically friendly environment. This podcast is not quite as controversial as many of them, but please don't forget to subscribe, guys. And check me out on Instagram. I'm at the One Faust Chicho, and we also have our podcast Instagram, Far Out with Faust. We're across the board. If you want to support my work, please check out my Patreon page. We are working on some really cool customizable merch for our people. We have a great community there we're trying to build. And please share this podcast, guys, so we can continue to grow and expand our audience and share these profound and important conversations that we have here. Knowledge is power. And I thank you, my friends. God bless you and much love to you.